us. Today we are talking to Helen O'Hanlon, one of our authors who deals with all things cognitive and behavioural. Helen and I are going to have a chat today about the current climate, working with your horses after a break, and a roadmap for Archie and I's adventures when we can get back out and do stuff. Let us know what you think. There'll be a follow-up article in the next issue. And I hope you're all staying safe and well. Bye. The human condition needs something to aim for. I think when we all sit wading in this, then it's just detrimental. So for Archie and I, for me, that's I'm trying to think of ways forward for us both, not just in terms of his training, but also my mental health and attitude towards it. For example, they've opened up, we are the main jump, where I'm based is the main jump cross centre for the UK. Okay. So as a livery, we're not usually allowed on course, because obviously it's kept for training and competition. Yes. But obviously because of lockdown, they've opened it up to us, not with the jumps, but just as an extra place to hack, etc. And it's got like lakes and a lot of water, and it's a really great setup. I took Archie there the other day. And where I thought we had we have a solid foundation, and we kind of were going up hills and through water, and then I saw a goose. I know this sounds ridiculous. I saw geese with their goslings, and it hissed at me. And the second the bloody thing hissed at me, I went, I don't like this. Yeah. I don't like this. And then my saddle slipped, so I had to get off and get on and sort that out. And then he saw something in the distance, and he just didn't he's never bucked with me. It was excitement, because he was like, I kind of know what all this is about. I want to go. And for a second, I suddenly thought, well, I'd had real issues with confidence. Then I had my pacemaker fitted, because obviously I found out I had heart trouble. That sorted. That pretty much, I thought that's fixed me. It wasn't I had a confidence issue. It was I had an arrhythmia. Now that's sorted. I'm okay. So for me, on Thursday, when he did that bucket stand, and I mean, I sat it and it was fine, and I didn't clam up or anything, but I thought this has got the potential to turn into something I don't want it to turn into. Yeah, I want to be able to hack him in open spaces. The last issue was the last issue feature for us was obviously trying to work on our canter, because we've had a bit of problems with that. You know, I want to be able to ultimately canter him in open spaces without worrying. And I also want to do jump cross. So I want to be able to do stuff with my horse where we're not going into a new environment and he is losing his marbles. And obviously the horsemanship is where that comes in, and we have a really solid foundation, I feel. But part of that foundation is me being a good enough leader. And at that point, as soon as I saw that goose, those geese, I just went, I was attacked by a swan. So that little thing, that really insignificant, non-horse related thing was enough for me to wobble. And it was enough for him to go, well, she's not, this is a new environment and she's not really paying attention. So I'll have to. Does any of that rambling make sense whatsoever?
No, that makes sense. To start with what you were saying initially about absolutely when people are away from their horses, and that it is somewhat of a perishable skill. Okay. That absolutely maybe somebody hasn't even been to see their horse for the last 2 months, and we can be thinking of lots of things. And I often think, our horsemanship starts at home rather, probably emptying the dishwasher. That we think, oh, lockdown is over now and I want to get out and I want to see my horse. And we start maybe thinking about riding, or we think, oh my goodness, he hasn't been ridden for 2 months, and suddenly you start to feel the heart go, and you start to feel, oh, you're kind of a little bit short for breath. And that's the kind of the thought element of it, that we think our way into a physiological response, if that makes sense. And then the other leg of that is it's a real kind of like feeling, and a feeling is always much faster than a thought. So when you were out the other day and you were riding and you saw the geese, your amygdala in your brain, so your amygdala kind of processes like what's happening in the environment. And it suddenly took this in, and it was like, I'm suddenly not okay here. And it activates our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight. And even though it's a goose and we don't really know exactly what's going to happen there, and you might say now when you look back on that, oh, you know, it's a bit ridiculous, like it was just a goose and so on. And it might seem a little irrational now, but at the time, that feeling of fear was really rational to you when that was happening. So I suppose what I say to people when they find themselves in those situations is to retreat, like what you did, to literally just, you know, jump off. If you feel that like your safety is really compromised, that's absolutely the best thing to do in that situation. Because also if we kind of stay in that triggered response, our sympathetic nervous system is only going to get more into fight, flight, or freeze. And also, like when our adrenaline and our cortisol starts to come up, you know, particularly at clinics, sometimes people would talk about this, that they went and they did a clinic and they don't really remember any of it when they came home. And when I hear somebody saying that, I think instantly, you know, their sympathetic nervous system was really activated, their adrenaline and their cortisol was so high, the brain didn't really prioritize recording those experiences anymore. So I think coming at it from two legs of it, that absolutely, you know, you're talking about your goals and the things that you want to achieve, and we can look at it from the thought angle of, you know, what are your thoughts, what are your beliefs around that, but also there's the emotional trigger. That, as I said, think of the thought element of it when you're at home and you're unloading the dishwasher and you start to feel maybe sometimes a bit uneasy about the things that you think you need to do with your horse. That's the thought leg of it. And then when you're out and you see the goose or a plastic bag flaps, that's trigger. And we were straight into that kind of trauma response of thinking something is going to go wrong here and I'm really not okay. So the answer to both of those is, if we have the wherewithal and we can kind of catch ourselves and we're aware of that we're doing this, is to retreat and take a step back from it. And I suppose in my own experience, grew up around horses, worked professionally with horses, and in 2006 I had a very bad fall from a horse and I ended up very badly injured and so on. And I was never the most confident person around horses, but whatever shreds of confidence I had after that fall were completely gone. And it was really a hard road to rebuilding my confidence. And now, thankfully, I have more confidence now than I did even pre the accident.
Good.
But I think, you know, so much of it is like around our self-awareness as well. All of the time when I worked in yards professionally, because it was my job, I gave away my locus of evaluation to other people. So if they told me I had to ride that horse, you know, there was no dialogue in my head. It was just something that I had to go and do. So a huge part of rebuilding my confidence was around developing my own internal locus of evaluation, of saying, okay, I actually call the shots here. And is this something that I feel safe with, or is it something that I feel comfortable with? And even though my confidence is to the point of now that I'm very happy with it, I'll retreat all day long. You know, if I'm out and I see a goose or I see something that I'm not happy about, if you're thinking about getting off, it's too late. You should already be standing on your own two legs. So I think, again, just to reiterate those points, that we have the thought angle of it, which is what I wrote about in the magazine about the cognitive behavioral coaching, of like, what are our thoughts, what are our cognitions, and our thoughts eventually become our beliefs. So if we think something enough, it's like, you know, we've got it on repeat and we're constantly inputting that into our mind. So if we have enough of the same thought, that becomes our belief. But then the other side of it is sometimes we just get triggered and that bypasses thought, you know. And again, sometimes it can be hard when somebody is kind of triggered and, you know, maybe brings them back to a time in the past where they had a negative experience. People do get like very frozen in that. And, you know, I definitely think that if that happens to people continually, it's good to talk about that off the horse and, you know, talk about where is this maybe coming from and so on and so forth. And something that I have participated in myself around this, and also some of my clients, is EMDR therapy. So my mother actually happens to be a psychotherapist, and she specializes in the area of trauma. So like as a coach, we don't really deal with trauma, but I have an awareness of trauma. Does that make sense? Of you know, how it works and so on and so forth. And I found after I had the accident, and also it doesn't even have to be a specific trauma. Sometimes people feel really activated by things, and when they talk about it and, you know, they try to get their cognitions out about it, there's nothing really that they can think back on specifically happened that causes them to be really triggered in those moments. Now, I happened just to have something quite specific that happened to me, but with the EMDR, it's kind of like a post-traumatic kind of therapy, and it's something that I really encourage for people if they can't talk themselves out of an issue. Do you know what I mean? It kind of works with the eyes and like reprogramming the brain and that. And like what it stands for is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I think certainly in an equestrian area, I think it's something that's definitely very much so underutilized. That, you know, what happens with, say, when you have EMDR, you're remembering instead of kind of re-experiencing. And I'm just lucky in my practice that sometimes if I meet clients and I think, yeah, they really need trauma work, that I can hand them over to my mom. So I'm kind of lucky that we work in partnership. Yeah, so it's definitely very interesting. And I think, you know, an awful lot of people who've had accidents or they have like a lot of confidence issues would really benefit from EMDR therapy.
Because it's really funny, actually, as an equestrian, what can trigger you. So we've obviously, Horsemanship Journal, we've started, I'm sure you've seen a book club where we're reviewing, you know, various equestrian titles. And I'm in the process of reading our most recent one, which is Continuing the Ride by Chrissy McDonald.
Yeah, I got it actually. Yeah, it's a great book.
I thought I was fine until I started reading Chrissy's book. I got about halfway through it and I had to put it down. I just thought, I can't actually read this, because it was starting to kind of re-trigger areas in my confidence riding, because I had a big wreck as well. That's kind of what did it for me years ago, and nothing to do with archery. You know, I went from being a professional horsewoman. The only times I've ever had accidents, like you say, is when I've given control to others and I've just gone ahead and pushed through it. But reading Chrissy's book, which is brilliant, I started to get that rise of emotion in me where I thought, I actually can't read this at the moment, because if I carry on, I'm not going to be able to get on my horse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that's very clever to just say, this is like really re-triggering me and this is reactivating what's in me. And I find equally with my own story of my own accident that I have, I'll talk about it a little bit, and I have processed it and I've had EMDR therapy for it, but it's not a narrative that I overly like to entertain now. In the beginning, I really, you know, I suppose initially I wasn't really telling anyone about how badly I felt, and then I kind of took the lid off and, you know, I wanted to tell everybody about this experience that I had. But as the time has moved on, it's not a narrative that I overly entertain, because I think could kind of almost re-trigger me or kind of like re-traumatize some of the feelings that I had. And I think what you're saying there about reading the book is, you know, that's good self-awareness to say, I kind of feel my levels rising now, and this is maybe something that I don't need to entertain. And I suppose what you were saying of, you know, when you had an accident or an issue before, it wasn't with Archie. But again, getting back to the amygdala in the brain, which is our processing center, it doesn't really think like that.
Does it?
No, it doesn't. And, you know, like our brain is always there, like trying to protect us. And I think that was one of the things that helped me to be more compassionate to myself. Of saying, you know, my brain is not working against me and it's not trying to sabotage any of my goals. It's just trying to protect me. And also, I think in my own situation, I had a lot of very negative pictures built up of issues that I'd had, and, you know, having to force myself through things when I was working professionally with horses. And it took me a long time to build up that trust with myself to say, yeah, I can go around horses and I can be with them and I can make good decisions and I can keep myself safe. But it's literally like in the beginning, you're just building up moments. And now I feel like I've got to chapters of experience that I have where I was able to keep myself safe. So again, with the cognitive behavioral angle on it, you know, you could say to yourself about reframing your thoughts out the other day on the jump cross course of saying, I'm really pleased that I was able to have my own internal locus of evaluation and jump off when I perceived that something was going to be a problem. And, you know, I think compassion and retreating is almost always the answer. Like, draw back, be nice to yourself and say, you know what, that was like a really bright thing to do in that situation. You're preserving your own confidence and you're preserving your horse's confidence. And I think, you know, sometimes from a traditional background, it's like last year I was out hacking my horse Charlie on the road, and this huge piece of machinery, tractor, and I can't remember what was on the back of it, came flying along the road. And to be honest with you, if I was walking, I would have found this quite intimidating. It's just like a country road.
Yeah.
And I jumped off, you know. And if that was years ago, I would have thought about the judgment of other people. And I would have thought, oh, I should be able to ride my horse past this. And I thought, hang on here, Helen, you know, you wouldn't have been very comfortable to walk past it. I'd have really stood into the ditch if I was just on my own 2 feet, never mind when I was on my horse. And again, it's like about our thoughts and beliefs. I started to kind of go, oh, I should have been able to stay on and I should have gone past. And I was like, hey, hang on a minute. That was like really very clever. You were minding yourself, you were minding your horse. And that was an intimidating thing for me if I had no horse with me, you know, because it kind of came around a bend, it didn't know we were there, and so on and so forth. So I think it's kind of about like quickly kind of reframing our thoughts around it. And of course, like we have to reflect on, like what happened, you know. I'd often say to myself, you know, could my horse have been like more connected before I got on? Could I have done more groundwork? What were some of the issues? And of course, like, you know, in my job as a teacher and a coach, I always talk about being the reflective practitioner of saying, okay, I'm going to try and like trace back what happened here. And of course, you know, see, is there anything to work on? But also just be careful of the thoughts that I'm having and trying to reframe it for myself. So, you know, what you're talking about there, I think that's, as I said, a very good thing to do. And also kind of that you're in the moment. You're not kind of overly in fight, flight, or freeze, that you can say, hey, I'm going to withdraw and I'm going to pull myself out of the situation. So I would be commending myself for doing something like that.
I think as adults that we find it really difficult to actually be kind to ourselves. I think like recent times with COVID-19, you know, there's been a real push on social media and with conversations with people about, you know, being compassionate because we're in uncharted territory. So be kind to yourself, and you know, there are going to be good days and bad days, but I still feel that we as a species find it really we can be compassionate to other people. Being compassionate to ourselves is like a really difficult thing to do. And just going back to what you were saying, obviously there's that fine line as well when you've had something happen to you, between the narrative of talking about it all the time, but then going the other way and not talking about it at all. And I think as an equestrian community, we are getting better at sort of supporting people that have had issues in confidence or accidents or whatever. Whereas not that long ago, if you said you were worried about riding your horse, it would have been seen as a massive weakness, and no one ever admitted anything. So I think we are, you know, we're obviously making, and through things like cognitive behavioral therapy and other the other therapies you were talking about, you know, we are making progress, but it's kind of fostering that community and that that safe place almost where people can kind of say, you know, actually we do have wobbles. And I think, you know, high profile riders that admit to it, that's definitely a help. That normalizes it. I think that's it. It's normalizing that we're all human and things happen. You know, at the end of the day, we work with half a ton scaredy cats, basically.
And you know, they're set up as prey animals to be quite different to us. We're very direct line thinkers. A horse is a very lateral thinker. And I think absolutely what you're saying there is very important, that people's experience is normalized. And you know, I've often heard Pippa Funnell talk about this, the eventer. She said that, you know, when sports psychology came about, she was like really interested in this, and everyone was saying, oh, we have to go, this is part of training, and like that's really kind of given her an edge. And you know, she really talks about the positives of sports psychology. I think another interesting thing that I come across a lot in my work is that maybe people who have ridden as children, they often like look back with rose tinted glasses saying, oh, you know, when I was a kid, I just jumped on the horse and I went and everything was great. And of course, you know, children are often kind of more natural and they don't overthink things. But one of the things that I often point out to people around that is about our brain development. So when we're children, our brain is developing at a rapid rate, and our prefrontal cortex is not like fully hooked up. And our prefrontal cortex is where all of our executive function comes from, things like looking at cause and effect, things like forecasting, things like, you know, assessing danger. That's the part of the brain that really does that. And it's really not until your mid-20s, and sometimes even a little bit later with men, that prefrontal cortex is fully integrated with the rest of the brain.
Okay.
So as we get older, we actually have a better lens and a better filter for assessing danger. So like often when we were children, people say, oh, I was really, carefree and I didn't concern myself with things. Yeah, because your prefrontal cortex wasn't fully hooked up to allow you to assess threat and danger.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, it is. And people think, oh, I wish I could be like when I was a child, but you can't because your brain was not fully integrated when you were doing that.
Yeah.
And also, if you got a fall, again, your prefrontal cortex didn't really process that. Of course, you could. Of course, as a child, you can be traumatized too. But again, when we went to that same situation again, the prefrontal cortex still wasn't great at telling us, no, this is not a good idea. And you kind of get away with a lot of stuff as a kid. But it's unrealistic to think that we can return to that because our brain is now actually more integrated and it's better. It's actually safer now for us what we're doing. And I think, sometimes when we look back on things as well, that it can be kind of fantastical and we create this wonderful narrative around like what things were like in the past. And maybe in reality, there were moments of that weren't great as well. I often hear that narrative with equestrians. Oh, when I was a child, I was able to do this, or when I was a teenager, I wish I could go and do that again. And of course, you can still have those goals and have that as something to work towards. But I just think that brain development part is an interesting consideration.
It's quite important. And I think this is having that sort of well-rounded approach to this, which is why I obviously wanted to do this feature with you. It's not just, obviously our horses training and their development is really important. So obviously that's a factor. But actually as a rider, there's a lot of stuff about physical development and, working on your core, etc., and how to utilize yourself as an athlete in that respect. But I think the mental and psychological and emotional portion is so vital as well, because we aren't machines and we're not sat on machines. And like you say, cause and effect, things that happen. Sometimes you don't realize you have a trigger until you're in the moment and you go, oh yeah, there's my trigger. So, for bringing it sort of back to like Archie and myself, where I have these ultimate goals for us. So jumping for me is a big thing. I haven't really competitively or jumped. And obviously one of our authors, Hannah Walton, is working with me on a practical level for that, which is fantastic. But obviously being the incident on the jump course, the jump cross course that we had, it wasn't about the goose, and it then brought up this whole, is he going to be like that on every course that I'm ever, that I ever take him on? If I take him there again, is he going to, get all excited? Because he's not stupid. He was jumped before I had him, so he recognizes the layout. He was picking up on the the atmosphere and the adrenaline from the other horse, because the other horse has, that we went out with, had competed regularly on this course, and they're herd animals, so they tune in. But it immediately brought up that anxiety in me of, I'm never going to be able to do this anywhere because he's always going to do that there. And again, you kind of, I tried to rationalize with myself that isn't the case, and, blah, blah, blah. But it's really easy to go, well, I can't do it. I'm just not going to do it. It's just too much. Especially, I think, when you're a mum and you're in your 40s and, everything else, you just go, oh, well, it's not worth it. And then I have a word with myself and I go, don't be so bloody ridiculous. Yeah. You just need to make a path and a plan through it. And I think, you have to show the vulnerability. Me as an editor of this magazine, I'm not going to sit there and say I know it all, because I don't. I've had the privilege of training with some fabulous people, but I'm going to forever be a student. But I thought this would be a prime opportunity to like work with yourself, work with Hannah, and really pull it together for the magazine of, this is something that I want to do, be it jumping, be it working cows, which I'm hoping to do with Sean later in the year. Any of this stuff, it all comes back. Doesn't matter if it's a jump, a cow, a goose. It all comes back to kind of having those fundamentals in place, not just with your horse, but with your own physical and emotional health.
Absolutely. And all the skills, that I talk about with people in coaching, they're literally like a mental muscle. The more we do them, the more we can catch ourselves, the more that we develop our self-awareness, the better things get for us. And I think what you said there is a very good start of that. We have to be, we have to be vulnerable and kind of like own up to where we're at. And I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown's work.
Yeah, she's
And
awesome.
oh, she's amazing. Yeah. And, I think she's like really down to earth, and I love that. And one of the things I always talk about is like, one of the keys to success is support. But I suppose, I think we have to be careful around that too. You need a support system around you, that you can be vulnerable. And I always say to people when I'm working with them, it doesn't matter if it's coaching to do with horses or not, that I always say, this is a confidential space. The only time that I'm going to have to expose what's said here is if you say that you're going to harm yourself or you're going to harm somebody else, when they're my professional guidelines and the conduct that I sign up to. So I think about that vulnerability is really important, and it's really admirable. And I think there's a huge shame culture that is being broken down in equestrianism. And I know that myself, that I was so afraid to say how bad I was, back in like 2006, 2007. I was just so raw. And also, I think everything has a knock-on effect, the mind and the body. My body wasn't working very well for me. And, even still, I wouldn't have super mobility in my left arm and shoulder. And the minute that I found people that I could be vulnerable with and that they would offer me support, my progress just shot up. But again, I think we have to be very careful of that, when we're working with a mental coach or we're finding instructors to work with, that they're allowing that vulnerability and that it's a safe space to share it. And I think, being careful with the people that you surround yourself. It's literally, I always think, with my horses, I obviously have my own supervision course or supervision that I go to for coaching. I'm also very lucky that I have my mum, who is a psychotherapist, to talk things through. But it also boils down to like my farrier. When he comes, is he going to be natural with my horses, and is it going to create a good vibe on the yard? And it's the same, I was very lucky after my accident that I found two excellent instructors, Sarah and Chris Brady, who are both 3-star rally professionals. They were really good at the cognitive side of it and like helping me along with it. But I think I would say to people, find the right instructors, find the right people to kind of support your dream and to get you to where you need to be. But again, it has to be, you can't be vulnerable if it's not a secure space where what you're saying is honored and it's not kind of dismissed in some way. So I think that's kind of, I suppose, just agreeing with what you said there about vulnerability is really important. And I think as well, as a coach and horsewoman myself, I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm really interested in what I do. I'm not an expert, because I think when you say that you're an expert in something, it really shuts down the possibilities to other learning and to, thinking about other frames of reference and other perspectives. So I think that's very important, the vulnerability. And I think, I've seen more people not make progress by saying, oh, I'm fine, I don't have a confidence issue, and trying to gloss over it.
Yeah.
I always think, in my opinion, that the progress there is very superficial, because the base underneath it is still kind of quite weakened by whatever cognitive issues are going on. The other thing is, one of the things I talk a lot about is disputing what we think ourselves. So like, if your child came home to you and they said, oh, I was in school today and Mary said that my hair was dreadful, you'd be like, oh my God, your hair is beautiful. You have lovely soft hair and the color of it is gorgeous. And like, with children, we're really good at like disputing things that people have said to them. But we're not always very good at disputing what we say to ourselves. So people say, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I can't even hack my horse. Jeez, we were only out 10 minutes and I had to jump off. If that was your friend that was saying that to you, or if it was your child, you would find up 10 different reasons to dispute. And you'd say that was really safe. And like also the point that you made there, that, they're half a ton of flesh with a mind of their own. And like my mother always says to me, it's not stamp collecting. So, take it easy with yourself. And I'm sure, no offense to stamp collectors, I'm sure they have their own stresses and strains of stamp collecting.
Those paper cuts.
It's dreadful. But we're dealing with something that is alive and that has a mind of its own. And I think even thinking about handling a horse, never mind riding a horse, is a really brave thing. I always think of whoever saw horses in the wild hundreds and thousands of years ago and said, I'm going to sit up on them. You would just say you're absolutely bonkers to think that you can do that. So again, I think it's getting back to that compassion and kind of disputing. I'm saying, no, that was a really clever thing to do. jump off, it didn't feel safe, let's preserve our confidence for another day. And another thing as well that I always say to people, if your goal is, I want to get out there again and I want to do the same thing tomorrow and I want to ride out onto the horse and get it done, that can be very overwhelming if you've just had a negative experience. So I always remember with Charlie in the beginning, my goals were like up here and my ability was like down here. So I would come up with this big thing I wanted to do today, and then I would be talking myself out of it, of saying, oh, well, I have all this stuff to do, and you know what, really, I don't have the time to go to the yard today, and so on and so forth. So once I kind of copped that I was doing this all the time, like saying that we don't have time for our horses, there's usually some sort of cognitive distortion at the back of that, that we're telling ourselves some reason why we can't go. So what I would say is, if I said I want to go out and I want to jump a course of jumps today with Charlie, and if, say, suddenly I start to get like, oh God, I'm not feeling great, and look at all that washing that I have to do, and so on, I would say, okay, could I half the goal? Could I half the goal again and make it something palatable and appealing for myself to show up?
Yeah.
And like, I really think like 80% of our success is showing up, but we have to make that showing up appealing to ourselves. So you could say to yourself, I'm not going to go out on the cross-country course. I'm going to work with Archie in the school, and we're actually just going to do some groundwork in the school. I'm not even allowed to ride today. And say, you know, put a timer on your phone, say I'm going to show up for 20 minutes of groundwork in the school, and that's it. And when we kind of make the steps smaller for ourselves to get back there, they're more appealing, they're more attractive, and it helps us to show up. It's like a client of mine who was suffering from, you know, some confidence issues, again, a horse that was like very difficult. I would say to her, could you just show up and could you just groom?
Yeah.
To just kind of break those cognitive distortions that we have of saying, well, if I have to show up at the yard, that means I have to jump 1.10 m. And we mightn't even know on a conscious level that we're doing that, but our goals are so big and we're telling ourselves that we can't achieve them. I certainly wouldn't want to show up. It's not creating a show up mentality if you think I have to get straight back out on the course and I have to do exactly that thing again.
And that's so this was Tuesday when I went out with him. So yesterday I just showed up and we did 20 minutes in school. We did probably 15 minutes of groundwork and 20 minutes of just light schooling, and then I was like, right, I'm done. But it's funny, isn't it, because we are direct line thinkers. The night before I'm going to go and ride on there again, and I stopped myself and I was just like, no, if I try and push myself through this, I'm gonna go bang, which affects him. I mean, he is a dream, you know, he's a good boy, and I trust him implicitly. So, you know, I feel really lucky. Well, not luck is spelled work, isn't it? But, you know, I feel very lucky in the fact that, that we've worked really hard and we've got this relationship, and that I maybe don't have some of the issues that other people will experience with their horse. And that's another thing, isn't it? Dealing with the issues that you have in an animal and then having to deal with yourself as well. Sometimes that can be quite a heady mix. So yeah, I think what you said was, you know, it's kind of reassuring that you've said that, because that's exactly what I took the pressure off myself and just went, go do something that I know that we can. And it was weird. And you start to go, oh, it's windy. Oh, you know, it's there's a ladybug on the fence. There's a full moon somewhere.
Absolutely. And suddenly there's 10 things, and then there's a reason that we can't go. And I just often say to myself, you know, thank you very much, brain. I'm really happy that you're looking out for me and you're trying to protect me. But actually, I can come up with a plan to keep myself safe. And I think as well, two different angles that I often talk about is sometimes we go out and we have a session with our horses and it's just a mileage session. Nothing went particularly well. Both of you just survived. And I think that used to like really bother me in the past. You know, if I had one bad ride, it was like, oh, this is useless. I'm not going to get anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And now I just say to myself, yeah, you've had bad sessions before and they always come good. And I think as well, when we have one bad ride, it's like what I call one bad ride, the multiplier effect, because we had one bad ride, but we might have reridden that ride 25 times. So now we had the actual bad ride, and we have the 25 ones that we visualized. So we've gone from one bad ride to 26.
Okay.
Like that.
Yeah.
Because we keep replaying it, and we're actually not very good at replaying the good experiences that we had. We don't go out and have an
amazing we're alive as a species, really, isn't it? We're not very good at this positive malarkey.
No, we're not. We're programmed in that way to have negativity bias. You know, that going back thousands of years ago when we were living in caves, and a bit like the horses as prey animals, if we heard rustling in the bushes over there, it was in our best interest to say, I really better investigate that, because if we don't, we say, oh, it's grand, you know, you could be dead. So we're programmed, you know, that's an evolutionary thing, that we have this negativity bias. And, you know, lots of different research tells us different things, but they say, like, for every negative thing, we need roughly 3 to cancel it out.
Okay.
So, like, you have one bad ride, you probably need 3 good ones to balance out the two. But as I said, I often think of that. I'm like, yeah, Helen, if you keep replaying that, you know, you're stacking up the bad rides. And we don't do that as much with the good ones. You know, it's something that, like, I think myself, even, thankfully, I have, you know, more good rides now than I have bad ones. But I think, I should probably replay some of those. And it's kind of like, it's reinstalling new software in there to say, you know, the story is changing. And also, you know, you think about when you participate in gratitude practice. So saying, you know what, I went to the school the other day and I just did 20 minutes of groundwork, and that went really well, and I'm really glad, and I'm building myself back up from that experience. You know, that's looking at that in a gratitude way. And we know that when we're good at being grateful for things, it also bolsters our resilience for when things are not going very well. So it's almost like we have something to fall back on. You know, I use a gratitude journal, you know, just for all aspects of my life. And I think, you know, I look at that book and I say, yeah, you know, we're into May now, and there's a good stack of that book that's filled in. And all of that is things that are going really well. Imagine I filled every page of that notebook to say, these are the things that are going really well. And, you know, that's very much so like a positive psychology angle of focusing on our strengths. You went out on the cross-country course, you jumped off and you fixed your saddle, and you kind of thought, you know what, I need to retreat from this situation. It doesn't feel really safe. You could say to yourself, that was my internal locus of evaluation working really well. The next day I went to the school and I just checked our connection, and I made sure that we had a good, you know, good connection, and things went well. And yeah, of course, you still have that as the end goal. But sometimes with traditional goal setting, it causes us to focus on the lack, the things that we don't have, as opposed to the things that we do have. And that's why, you know, that kind of gratitude practice and saying, okay, it's maybe not exactly where I want to be, but these are the things that went very well in this session. That grateful attitude and that gratitude practice, it gives us resilience for when things go wrong, because we know that we have a stock of things to look back on that were positive.
And, you know, for me, it's very much, you know, I had 40 minutes of that ride where he was alert, but he was with me. And, you know, I am very grateful that 9 out of 10 of our rides are fabulous. You know, obviously you have the schooling and the technical stuff that you want to get right. And there's that. But in terms of our connection and me feeling safe and confident, I do. I think I was more shocked that I had that wobble with him, because I've not really had that with him before. I've not experienced a wobble. But like you say, it was the right thing to do. You know, my saddle had slipped, and mentally I was worrying that I was going to be killed by a flock of geese. So completely irrational. But my trust in him is still there, and I'm very grateful for that. You know, I feel our relationship is still there. I don't have, and I have been there, and I would never judge anyone that is there at the moment or has been. I have been there with horses where I've thought, I can't even tack you up, never mind get a foot in the stirrup, because I'm actually so terrified of what might happen. And it's so debilitating when it's, you know, horses are my passion, they're my life. I write about them, I read about them. You know, it's with any horse person, even if you don't do it professionally, they're a love. It's not just a sport, it's who you are. So to then be presented with the realization that something that you desperately love is then impacting you in such a negative way, it's just it's horrendous. So, you know, I think the more that we can talk about it and say, you know, yeah, I've been there, and, you know, this is how, and these are resources that where you can be vulnerable and you can seek support, I think is really important, because and being grateful. I'm grateful that we have these resources as well.
Absolutely. And I think, having gone to lots of sports psychology talks and different things like that, and particularly looking at with horses, really you have to have a kind of a multifaceted team. Sometimes, you get instructors who are really good at the mental side of it as well. And some people have a separate mental coach and they have somebody for the horses as well. But if you don't feel safe, you can't have fun. And I always think about, the basics, because I obviously help people with their horses as well. You need to be able to bend your horse to stop. You need to be able to get off in a hurry. You need to be able to shut down what's happening. And sometimes I think people have really good strategies, of saying, visualize it going well. Yeah, like that's great. And then visualization is a really powerful tool, and it's something that I use a lot. But if we don't have our horses and we don't have somebody as an instructor to help us, do you know what I'm trying to say? A horse that's absolutely jacked up on adrenaline, no amount of positive visualization is going to help you to overcome that. You need skills, you need the strategy from a horse person. And I just think sometimes that's lacking, that someone say, well, my horse keeps running away. Well, visualize it going well, focus on your breathing and all of these things. And I think, I'm sorry, but I just don't think that's going to work unless, you have somebody who can help you to get your horse into a safe space. And like I said, you cannot have fun if you don't feel safe. Definitely. And as being able to bend them to a stop, being able to jump off, being able to shut that down and keep yourself safe. I think that, as I said, it's multifaceted. There's the physical, there's the mental, and there's emotional. But, if you don't physically feel safe, no amount of thinking about it is going to help you to feel well. So I think it's important to have the mental side of it taken care of, but also an instructor that can advise people on how to stay safe with their horses.
Yeah, you need those practical skills, don't you? And it's like you said before, by the time you've thought about getting off, it's too late. And as I said to people that I'm out riding with, I was like, if I'm getting off, I don't, if I get off, I can always get back on.
Exactly. Yeah.
You deal with what's in front of you, and then you remount if it's safe to do so, and you feel that's the right thing to do. But again, it's letting people know that is an option, because it is, like you say, I don't want to say traditional, because there are a lot of good traditional riders that would obviously utilize safe ways of dealing with things.
Maybe a lot of people's formative experience in horses was around stay on, letting them win and different things like that. And I think, I always think that that's a peculiar way to look at it. I think the horse and the rider needs to win every day, both of you, and to come away feeling, I got that right. But I agree that sometimes we can kind of put a lot of rules around not getting off, and, different things that people have affirmed for us in the past. And I think it's around having new affirmations and saying, it's okay for me to get off. It's okay for me to protect myself by jumping off my horse when I don't feel okay. And for me and my horsemanship, knowing that I can do that at any stage and being around people who support me to do that, that grows my confidence hugely.
Definitely. It's like tomorrow I'm going hacking with Jodie Risen. So she's a 3-star Pirelli, but she's my friend as well. So I know she's a good person to go out with hacking, because she gets it, and we both support each other in that way. And we know that. But I find, it's like you say, it's surrounding yourself with people that I find her very calming. And I feel safe with her, and safe that I can be vulnerable with her if need be. And she's given me a lot of support over the last 5 years, different horses, etc. But like I say, she's also my friend, and we're based at the same facility, so it's nice that we can go out together. But yeah, I thought the best person for me to ride with in a hacking environment next would be her. Because not only is she a great friend, but obviously she understands the strategies that need to be implemented if something does go wrong. And like you say, we can't control our environment. No one in any sport can control their environment. It doesn't matter what you do. And it's learning to kind of deal with that and be robust mentally and emotionally as well. I think it's so important.
Having a plan like what I have is a very good strategy. That you said that you're going to go and do that 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 is somebody who is supportive, as you said, that it's somebody that you can be vulnerable with. And I agree with you, that I know the people that I like to ride with, and I know the people that, it's nothing personal to them, but it just would be how I would do business, and I wouldn't put myself in the way of that. And I also think about my horse as well, that I have a duty of care to my horse, that I'm not going to put us in situations that are not safe for either of us.
Definitely.
And I think, if you think about resilience, of which we spoke about before, that resilience is identifying the strategies that you have or strategies that you already participate in that keep you safe and keep you well. So, you could say, if you were looking at it from a positive psychology point of view and you were writing down some of your strengths as a horsewoman, you've named a lot of them there, of saying, I know the people who are supportive to me. I know how to put myself in a supportive environment. I know how to keep myself safe. And as I said, we have to watch our thoughts, because our thoughts become our beliefs, and we're affirming the different things in there. And even just from what you're saying, it sounds like that you have a lot of architecture around you and your horse that actually does keep you quite safe. Things, actually, I should have said this at the beginning, of course, I think these things at the end, but I suppose about thinking even like what coaching is, that it's really a non-directive process. It's recognizing each person as that they are an expert on their lives and they're an expert on their horse, and it's just kind of like playing around with different strategies that might fit them. Because I think sometimes people think, oh, if I go to a coach or somebody, they're going to tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. And it's not a case of telling. It's really about like unpacking, and it's very much so about me reflecting the person's story back to them. Yeah. And sometimes even though we're saying something, we don't really hear that until somebody reflects back our own language to us. And it's just around like unpacking what's going on and maybe looking at some blind spots. Because I often think, oh, I'm really into self-awareness and all the rest of it, and I'll go to my coach or my therapist or I'll go to my instructor, and I'm like, that's really obvious, and I totally agree, but I never saw that before.
And I missed it.
Yeah, and I've often been like dumbfounded with thinking, this is amazing, like it's so obvious, and I totally agree with you, and I'm so pleased that you pointed this out, because recently someone was saying to me, as a coach, like, why do I still go to coaching? Why do I still go to therapy? Why do I still, have instructors that I work with? And I say, because, I have my perspective, and our own perspective can be quite limiting. And that's the idea, like, of going to a professional person. Just because I'm a professional doesn't mean I can see my own blind spots,
Yeah.
And I think that can be really an uplifting and kind of enlightening experience for someone to unpack something with you and to take it apart. And I think, it really adds to our overall wellness, our sense of happiness, our sense of direction. And like you said as well, like, we're working with a horse, it's not just ourselves. And sometimes I think we're really good at pushing ourselves, but sometimes you meet a horse and they're like, hey, lady, you can do that with yourself all day long, but you can't do that with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes even people say in horsemanship, what is feel? It's one of these elusive things of saying he or she has a great feel for a horse, or I need to develop more feel. And in psychological terms, feel is attunement. So it's attunement to yourself first, to your horse next, and then to the environment. Like, it's a three-way interchange, that if I'm not connected and self-aware of myself and grounded in my body, I can't be very tuned into my horse, and then I can't be very tuned into the environment, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a kind of a hierarchical structure, because sometimes people say to me, everything was fine, and then I was bucked off. And I think, not berating anybody or judging anybody on that, but you think they were probably bits and pieces going on there before that weren't noticed, if that makes sense. And I always think that if I get out of attunement with myself, I'm going to get out of attunement with the horse, and I'm going to be out of attunement with the environment that I'm in, and just kind of pairing it back. And that's been whole coaching sessions with me, in my own experience, and also with other people, of saying, where did I lose it? Where did I lose the connection, and why that happened? And I just think it's a fantastic tool just to get us back into balance with ourselves and our horses.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Talking about all my favorite things.